Good afternoon, everyone. Let's talk about social networks and whether yours are working for you and what we might do about it. Let me start with a tongue-in-cheek view of your social networks. 6 of the 7 deadly sins. Lust isn't there. We could have included Tinder. There's FOMO, fear of missing out, YOLO, you only live once. That has Airbnb. But so these are social networks, these are apps, but you're using your social networks for many purposes. Let's get a little more serious about the kinds of goals you might have for your social networks. Everybody wants to be able to share their own knowledge, build a personal brand. You want to be able to learn from the vast array of information that's coming in on your feeds. And you'd like to be able to relate. You want to strengthen your relationships, and you want to use those relationships to get referrals to make new relationships. Here's a stylized view of a social network. You're in the center of this network. You have 4 friends. Those are your direct connections. They have friends, which are your indirect connections. I call this stylized because in any given ring of that picture, none of the people are connected to each other. So you're the hub of this network, and it's a very sparse network because these people aren't connected within the rings. Real networks don't look like that. They have a lot more variety in them. And if we zoom out a little bit, what you'll typically see when you try to map a social network of any sort is you'll find a densely connected core with lots of hubs, and then a much sparser network on the edges where people have fewer connections. So there's a Pareto distribution. A small number of people in the network have the vast majority of the particular connections. So a question that social network theorists have been asking each other for about 90 years is, how connected are our social networks? How many steps are there between 2 people in a network? I don't know how many people in this room would know who both of these pictures are. The right side, Pony Ma, the CEO of Tencent. The left side, Curtis Jackson, the rapper, 50 Cent. So the question is, in a network, how many steps does it take us? How many connections from 50 Cent to Tencent? And if we measure that for every single pair of people in a network, we'll get a measure of how connected a social network might be. That's easy to do once you have big data and our current social network data, but for many years, this was a very hard problem to solve. And the best step forward on this problem was taken by the experimental social psychologist Stanley Milgram. Yes, that Stanley Milgram. Obedience to authority, the electric shock experiments. He changed gears after that work and did the small world study. And it's called the small world study. You know why. You sit down on an airplane, you start talking to your seatmate who you've never met, and you discover that their barber is your sister's best friend. And you look at each other and you say, oh, small world. Milgram, to measure how small the world might be, goes to Omaha, Nebraska, that's the red man, with lots of official-looking packages, gives them to their subjects in Omaha, and asks them to forward those packages to a stockbroker in Boston. That's the green man. But the catch is you can only forward those packages to someone you know. It has to be an acquaintance. So how do you strategize about this? If you know a stockbroker somewhere, you might send it there. If you know a Bostonian, you'll probably send it there. But if you don't know either of those 2 things, you're probably going to say, who in my network might know a Bostonian or a stockbroker? And that person's likely to be a hub, and you'll send it there. So Milgram and his team make their way to Boston and start collecting all these packages when they arrive at the stockbroker, and so they've logged all of their steps. Here's what they find. This is an actual scan from their 1967 Psychology Today article, and what you can see there in that histogram is that the number of intermediaries, so steps in between Omaha and Boston, on average was about 5. And so what that meant, and it was 6 steps from Omaha to Boston, giving rise to the popular phrase, thank you, 6 degrees of separation. Now, this phrase was a lowball estimate. And the reason why, upper right side of that picture, 44 chains were completed to Boston. They dropped 160 packages in Omaha, Nebraska. So there were lots of things that didn't make their way. So they probably underestimated that. But nonetheless, 6 degrees enshrined in popular folklore, right? 6 Degrees of Separation, the play by John Guare, the movie. 6 Degrees of Kevin Bacon, you may have played that. So this is a network of Kevin Bacon is in movies with a bunch of people, many movies, many cast members. They're in movies with other people. They're in movies with other people. So another stylized picture here where Kevin Bacon is the hub that's making these connections. Fast forward to the 21st century, we have big data. Facebook 2016 looks at their 1.8 billion Facebook users. So maybe there were 1 million real users. And they discover by measuring every pair of people that the average degrees of separation is down to 3.5 from what we thought was actually 6. So there's your evidence. The world is getting smaller. The question is whether we're actually benefiting from those smaller network paths. And I'm here to say that I don't think we are. And the reason why is what I like to call the small world paradox. So the world has gotten smaller. These network distances have been shrunk because of all of the hubs that keep emerging. The bigger our social networks are, the more people who are participating, the more connections we have, the more connected these hubs are. And they're making these short paths for us. But if you want to activate a network path, to use it to get a referral, for example, that means you're going to have to go through hubs on those shorter paths. And hubs are the very people who create what I like to call friction on paths. Let me illustrate with some real life examples. Here's two people in my network that you might recognize. I know you know Jeff Garrett, and I'm sure most of you would recognize Adam Grant as well. They're both hubs. What if I want to use a path that goes through these people? So Adam Grant, he's my Facebook friend, and I'm sure he's Facebook friends with Sheryl Sandberg, right? They're co-authors together as well. But if I ask Adam Grant, you know, I'd like to have a chance to have coffee with Sheryl Sandberg, can you help me out? I'm one of 100, maybe 1,000 people who are asking that same request. So is Adam going to spend his social capital on that? Or another great example, we thought about having Barack Obama come and speak to the undergraduates in our Crawley lecture. So I said, does Jeff Garrett know Barack Obama? Turns out no, but then we said, well, Amy Gutman knows Barack Obama. But again, should we run into the same social capital problem, or she goes to Joe Biden, who definitely knows Barack Obama, and we're asking a lot from people who are overwhelmed with these sorts of requests. So this is the small world paradox. Our paths are getting shorter, but these shorter paths are harder for us to really activate. To go back to thinking about what we want to do about it, what I want you to remember on the goals that we talked about, it turns out that different types of features of network that I've already brought up actually promote different network goals. So for example, dense ties, when people are closely connected in repetitive ways, that creates social capital. That gives people stronger relationships. These are groups of friends or family, coworkers, and the like. That'll help us with relating and sharing. Hubs, if you can get them to work for you, they're great for sharing information. They're certainly great for aggregating information for you. And they also, if they will forward some of your content to their broader network, that's going to be a boon for you. For learning and relating, I also like to talk about unique ties. Getting into the sparse part or different part of your network where it's not so densely connected gives you opportunities to learn new things or get referrals to people you wouldn't otherwise. So what do we do about this? Because these are competing sorts of features that they're existing simultaneously in our networks. So a couple of quick ideas for you to think about as you're using your social networks now or later. Prune your networks and prime your networks. What do I mean by that? So another stylized network, here's you surrounded by 5 direct contacts. I'm going to give each of your direct contacts 2 more contacts of their own. Look what happens. Very different on the left side and the right side of this particular picture. So let's start by talking about the right side, the red circles, and talk about pruning. Most of you, if you're like me, you're getting way too much information in your feeds and very repetitive information in your feeds. So you might want to think about how can you prune your feeds like you would prune a tree in order to get rid of some of those redundant voices. So another personal example, let's imagine that this middle red circle is my mom, and the other 2 red circles are my cousins. So we're all connected with each other. I guarantee you, if I do this, I didn't unfollow my cousins, I just muted them in the feed. I will get every single thing that my cousins put online because my mother will like them and my mother will share them, and then for good measure, my mother will call me to tell me about what she just liked and shared. So think about where you're getting that redundant information. Think about whether you need all of those feeds coming into what you're typically looking at. Second idea, priming. So now we're moving to the left side of this picture. On the sparse side of your network, this is where you get the unique information, the unique people, the unique knowledge. Here, what you want to make sure is that whoever is being something of a hub or the in-between between you and those contexts that you're targeting, those are the ones that you want to improve your connections with, strengthen your ties with. Because anybody who you're thinking about activating a path through, whatever their level of hubbiness, The stronger your connection is with them personally, the more you're likely to be able to get that favor or request that you're asking for. So that priming is something that you're going to do, and it doesn't rely on social networks. This goes back to networking from the 20th century as well. How can you volunteer for a cause that that person is interested in? How can you forward them some information that you think they might personally like? How can you offer them a chance to speak at a Wharton forum, et cetera, et cetera? Look for ways that certain people who you think could be good targets on paths that you can try to strengthen their relationships. So with that, prune your networks, prime your networks, and I hope that you can wind up in that very Zen middle intersection of the Venn diagram. Good luck. Thank you.